The wind was fierce that afternoon, the kind that howls through steel beams and rattles the bones of a bridge. Cars rushed past in a blur of noise and exhaust, and below, the river churned in restless gray waves. In the middle of all that chaos stood a young mother with trembling hands, clutching her baby to her chest as her vision slowly faded to black. She didn't mean to collapse. She didn't mean to let her knees give way. But exhaustion, hunger, and heartbreak don't ask permission. Before we step further into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of strangers becoming family, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Stories like this remind us that even on our darkest days, someone may be watching, ready to reach out a hand. Her name was Marisol Vega, and she had never imagined her life would unravel so quickly. At 24, she had once been full of quiet dreams, a small apartment filled with sunlight, a steady job at the local bakery, a partner who promised forever. But forever ended the day her boyfriend packed his bags, muttering about responsibility being too heavy for him. He left before their son turned 3 months old. By the time baby Mateo was 8 months, Marisol had been laid off from the bakery when it closed unexpectedly. Bills piled up like storm clouds. Rent was overdue. The landlord's warnings grew sharper. She tried everything, temporary cleaning jobs, selling homemade pastries at the market, applying to every help-wanted sign she passed. But opportunities slipped through her fingers like sand. That morning, she had received the final notice, eviction within 48 hours. She didn't know where to go. Her parents had passed away years before, and her only sister lived across the country, barely surviving herself. Pride kept Marisol from asking distant friends for help. Shame wrapped around her like a heavy coat she couldn't remove. So she walked. She strapped Mateo into his faded blue baby carrier and walked under the harsh midday sun, her thoughts swirling louder than the traffic. She ended up on Brookdale Bridge without realizing how she got there. It wasn't a place of beauty. It was industrial, loud, intimidating. But it offered one thing she desperately needed, a moment to think. She leaned against the railing, clutching Mateo close. He was fussing, hungry again. She hadn't eaten since the night before so that he could have the last of the formula. Her head throbbed. Her knees felt hollow. She tried to steady her breathing, staring at the river below. She wasn't thinking of jumping. She wasn't thinking of ending anything. She was simply overwhelmed. The world felt too heavy for her small frame to carry. The dizziness came like a sudden wave. Her grip loosened. Her vision blurred. And then the world tilted. Across the bridge, a man named Rowan Hale was driving his old pickup truck home from a construction job. He had just finished a double shift repairing storm damage along the riverbanks. His shoulders ached, and his hands were covered in dust. He almost didn't notice her at first. She looked like any other pedestrian, standing alone. But something in the way she swayed made his heart lurch. He slowed down instinctively. In the split second before she collapsed, he saw the baby carrier slip. Rowan didn't think. He reacted. He slammed his truck into park in the middle of the lane, ignoring the angry honks behind him. He sprinted toward her just as her knees buckled. In one swift motion, he caught her shoulder with one arm and grabbed the baby carrier with the other before it tipped over the railing. Mateo began crying loudly, startled but safe. Marisol's body went limp in Rowan's arms. The world around them erupted, drivers shouting, someone calling 911, tires screeching. But Rowan's focus narrowed to the fragile woman and the tiny boy clinging to life and gravity by inches. He laid her gently on the pavement, shielding her and the baby from the rush of traffic with his own body until help arrived. Paramedics came quickly. Rowan rode with them in the ambulance because there was no one else to go. He held Mateo awkwardly but carefully, whispering soft reassurances though he wasn't sure if the child could understand. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Rowan had already suspected. Severe dehydration. Malnutrition. Extreme exhaustion. Stress-induced fainting. It was a collapse born not from recklessness, but from quiet suffering. When Marisol woke hours later, the first thing she saw was fluorescent light. The second was a stranger sitting in a plastic chair beside her hospital bed, cradling Mateo with surprising gentleness for a man with rough, calloused hands. Embarrassment flooded her. Tears followed. Rowan didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't judge. He simply said he had been there at the right time. He told her that Mateo was safe. He told her she had scared them both half to death. Over the next few hours, fragments of her story spilled out. Not in a dramatic confession, but in broken pieces between tears and apologies. Rowan listened quietly. He had grown up in foster care, drifting between houses where he often felt invisible. He knew what it meant to feel alone in the world. When the social worker arrived, discussing temporary shelters and emergency placements, Rowan felt a deep discomfort settle in his chest. The idea of Marisol and Mateo being separated, even briefly, felt wrong. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. But he did offer something simple and sincere. He had a small house near the river, inherited from his late grandmother. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. He had a spare bedroom. He told the social worker he would be willing to provide temporary housing until Marisol got back on her feet. It wasn't charity. It was humanity. Marisol hesitated. Accepting help felt like admitting failure. But when she looked at Mateo sleeping peacefully in Rowan's arms, she realized pride wouldn't keep her son warm at night. She said yes. The first weeks were awkward. Rowan gave her space. He worked long hours and left groceries on the kitchen counter without making a show of it. Marisol insisted on cleaning the house and cooking simple meals as a way to contribute. Slowly, the air between them shifted from tension to gratitude. Mateo, oblivious to adult complications, adored Rowan almost immediately. He would giggle whenever Rowan lifted him high in the air. The sound filled the small house with something it hadn't known in years: joy. Marisol found part-time work at a local daycare. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Rowan helped her build a resume and drove her to interviews when her old car finally died. He never made her feel like a burden. Instead, he reminded her that everyone needs help sometimes. Months passed. Seasons changed. The river outside the house shimmered in summer sunlight and froze along the edges in winter. Somewhere between shared dinners and quiet evenings on the porch, gratitude deepened into friendship. Friendship warmed into something softer, steadier. Rowan admired Marisol's resilience. She admired his quiet strength. They were both cautious, both shaped by abandonment in different ways. But they also recognized something familiar in each other, a longing for belonging. One spring afternoon, nearly a year after the day on the bridge, Rowan found Mateo toddling across the yard, chasing butterflies. Marisol stood nearby, laughing freely in a way she hadn't before. The sight struck him with sudden clarity. This wasn't temporary anymore. He loved them. He didn't propose with fireworks or grand speeches. It was a simple moment at the kitchen table after Mateo had fallen asleep. He told her that saving her on the bridge had been instinct, but loving her had been a choice he made every day since. Marisol cried again, but this time the tears felt different. They felt like healing. They married in a small daytime ceremony by the river, sunlight dancing across the water. Mateo carried a tiny ring pillow, stumbling adorably down the grassy aisle. A few close friends from Rowan's job attended. The social worker who had once worried about Marisol's future sat proudly in the front row. Life didn't become perfect overnight. They faced financial stress, long work hours, and the normal struggles of parenting. But they faced them together. 2 years later, they welcomed twin girls, Amara and Soline, into the world. The house that once echoed with silence now overflowed with laughter, toys, and the chaotic symphony of family life. 6 years after the day on the bridge, Rowan stood once more at Brookdale Bridge, this time holding Marisol's hand while Mateo, now tall and bright-eyed, leaned over the railing under careful supervision. Amara and Solene chased each other nearby, their giggles carried by the wind. It was broad daylight again. The same river churned below. The same traffic roared past. But everything was different. Marisol looked at the spot where she had once collapsed. She remembered the dizziness, the fear, the overwhelming loneliness. She also remembered the feeling of being caught, literally and figuratively. One stranger's decision to stop had rewritten the course of her life. Rowan squeezed her hand gently. He never referred to himself as a hero. He always said he simply did what anyone should do. But Marisol knew not everyone would have slammed their truck into park and run toward a falling mother and child. Kindness isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just someone choosing not to look away. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps spread stories of hope and reminds others that compassion still exists in this world. And before we end, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word bridge below if you believe that one small act of kindness can change generations. Marisol often tells her children that families aren't only built by blood. They're built by courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand still when everyone else keeps driving. On that windy afternoon years ago, she thought her world was ending. Instead, it was quietly beginning. Now, when sunlight reflects off the river and the bridge hums with passing cars, she doesn't feel fear. She feels gratitude. She feels strength. She feels the warmth of small hands in hers and the steady presence of the man who refused to let her fall. Somewhere out there, someone may be standing on their own bridge today, overwhelmed, exhausted, unseen. And somewhere else, someone may be driving by, faced with a choice. Stop. Look. Reach. Because 6 years from now, that single moment could become a dining table filled with laughter. It could become bedtime stories and scraped knees and birthday candles. It could become a family of 5 watching the river together under a bright afternoon sky. And all because kindness chose to act.